Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/Security Weekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs. Their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's the security news. First quick announcement, April 1st through the 3rd, Disney's Contemporary Resort will be home to InfoSec World 2019. That's right. We will be there. All kinds of fun stuff going on. InfoSecWorld.com, InfoSecWorld.misty.com. Use the registration code OS19-SecWeek. Get you 15% off if you're interested in doing a free briefing or a conference interview. SecurityWeekly.com/conference request is where you go for that. Join the Security Weekly listener list. Visit SecurityWeekly.com/join the listen. Join the listener list. What is going? Is that? Are you messing with me with the teleprompter again? Is Burgundy just reading whatever's on the teleprompter?
You're killing me, Smalls.
I think we're going to put that on securityweekly.com/
JTLL.
No, securityweekly.com/subscribe. That's right, /subscribe. And there at the top, you'll be able to join a list and we'll learn your interests anonymously. And then when we produce content of your interest, we will send it to you. That is based on demand, actually. Of people saying you guys produced so much content. I'm overwhelmed. I just really want to know about application security and pen testing, right? So when we do stuff in those topics, we'll send it to you.
That's awesome.
I will move that to securityweekly.com/subscribe, which is where people are accustomed to going to subscribe to our shows. So, and you can find that on the main page. Most of the stuff we say in the show you can find on the main page. And we're going to update our navigation on the website, too, because it's in sore needing of updates on many different fronts.
It's funny because, segue into RSA week last week. I got quite a few questions from people asking if there's a way to, search, through episodes. I remember you guys had a talk a couple months ago on blah-de-blah. How do I find that? And I'm like, good luck.
I get that all the time, Jeff.
Yeah. So hopefully we're working on that is what you're saying.
We are, yeah. And this is the first step in that direction, Jeff, because we ourselves, we'll get the question oh, yeah, on episode something you talked about that. I'm like, the best thing now, you can go to the wiki and search it. And that has your mileage kind of varies. But basically with, the signing up and telling us your interest is kind of the building blocks for organizing some of our content in a more formal fashion so that ultimately you will be able to find our content. And I think we're still discussing the best ways to do that. It could be you join the mailing list or wherever and you tell us what you're interested in, and based on what people vote on, let's say pen testing is kind of broad, right? Pen testing and maybe Windows exploitation is a topic, and we'll go pull all of the Windows exploitation content, put that in one place, and then notify everyone kind of thing. So we're definitely working on all that stuff. It's going to be happening slowly throughout the year. So yeah, it's fun stuff.
Cool.
Good stuff.
I am InfoSec World. Before we get to RSA, I just want to talk about the next conference. So we did RSA, and then we did Ocean Cybersecurity Exchange Day, which was awesome. I saw a lot of met a lot of new friends, made a lot of new friends, I should say. Saw a lot of old friends. I gave a keynote presentation, which I was really happy with. I mean, honestly, I wish it could have been a little more rehearsed and polished. Having been up midnight the night before, adding my final slides that I was like, I had this like
what, midnight? That's early,
right? Yeah, exactly. But I had to have these. I'm like, oh, I need to build a slide that does this, and then like my slide, it was like 6 images with transitions, which I almost never do unless the situation is just really this situation just really called for it, and it came out really good. I was really happy with the content. And what's ironic, I realized after I gave the talk is all about borrowing from the past to improve the future. And so I give examples from music, and I pulled some content from the DerbyCon talk that I didn't fully get to flesh out and talk about in my DerbyCon talk just because of time restraints. And then I pulled snippets from some of my talks that front end some of our sponsored webcasts. And I totally borrowed from the past to create this presentation about, but
so
I was just like, it all came full.
You reused a lot of content of slides.
Yeah, but I did update.
So meta.
Right? And I did update all of the content as well. And I was pretty happy with the way that it turned out. And wonderful. Ocean was wonderful. I used to work there, as Dave Morble was on the show a couple weeks ago. And we've got a lot of great interviews we recorded at the conference.
That's awesome.
And some great interviews that are lined up. I mean, I met people that live and work in Rhode Island that I was like, you need to be like hanging out at the studio and coming on the show. So I'm really excited about
awesome.
What took place there.
I'm sad I missed it. I was deep in Python code,
hey,
and I was literally triple booked,
right,
including that one. So.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
it was,
dude.
Yeah,
we're going to do it again.
Try.
Ocean's kind of been now the home for this exchange day, which has been at Bryant University in the past, as well as CCRI.
Yep. And now it's Salve.
And now, Ocean is now owning the event, whereas those other universities actually owned the event before.
Got it.
Now Ocean owns that event, and they're just very excited to run it every year and continue to see it grow, which is great. And then the next conference, InfoSec World. Our slides are very late because Adrian Santabria and myself have been very, very busy, but we're putting together slides for 2019 InfoSec Buyer's Guide, and it's Adrian and I's advice about how to evaluate products.
Nice.
We're not going to recommend any products in the talk. We're going to talk about how you evaluate products in the market today, which I think is a very valid conversation to be had.
Absolutely. So. And interestingly enough, what were the dates for InfoSec World again?
1st through the 3rd.
April through the 3rd.
Are you at B-Sides Orlando? Is
no.
That still? No.
So B-Sides Orlando is the day before. Okay. I believe it's somewhere right around there. It's like the 31st.
Everyone should go to that too.
Absolutely,
by the way.
Absolutely. I will not be at B-Sides Orlando, unfortunately. I was asked to speak, and I just can't make it work schedule-wise.
No worries.
B-Sides Orlando is March 30th. It's March Saturday.
Yep. Excellent. Also, Sands Orlando is the 1st through the 8th.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Of April?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Where is that happening?
Let me hold on.
Let me guess. It's in Orlando.
Well, yeah, I know it's in Orlando, but where?
At which hotel? It is not a Disney property.
It's not the Swan and Dolphin.
It used to be the Hyatt Regency.
Okay, gotcha.
On International Drive.
There's going to be a lot of hackers in Florida.
A lot of hackers in Florida.
Yes.
Yep.
We should get together.
You totally
should all get
together. Josh will be there teaching.
I'll be out there from Saturday, March 30th. Is that a Saturday, March 30th?
Yep. Yeah, because that's the Saturday, day of B-Sides.
March 30th.
I'll be out there March 30th through April 6th. So Saturday to Saturday, I'm taking vacation with the family.
That's awesome.
During and after InfoSec. Well,
that's awesome.
Before, and we're flying in Saturday morning. So yeah.
I was hoping to be able to get down there.
Come hang out with Paul and his family at Disney World.
We could use babysitters, I mean.
Yeah, or at least someone to help wrangle kids in the park while you're there, right?
Absolutely.
Been there, done that.
Absolutely.
Been there, done that. And we were having some discussions this week that I was almost going to be at the SANS ICS Security Summit.
Yep.
Next week, but that fell through. We had some other plans come up.
That's in Orlando usually.
That is in Orlando.
Okay.
So that would have been weird if I was in Orlando next week. home and then back again.
And there'll likely be another trip to, speaking of conferences, in Orlando the end of October.
Really?
ISC Squared is having an event.
Oh, yes.
Got verbal confirmation that we will. We're still. I think we're still.
About that one
it's not a totally official, but it's official enough where I can say it on the show that we'll likely be there as well.
That's all, and ironically, we would normally be there somewhere
for Halloween, right?
Halloween,
yeah.
But this year, it's crazy that we're booking it out this far already.
Right.
But I'm booking Sans classes October and other gigs October, to the point that I have a class that is potentially that I really want to do for Sans that I haven't gotten the official notice that to do that would overlap with kids' birthdays at Disney.
Yep.
Which
could be awesome,
right? Which would overlap with that and Wild West Hack and Fest.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. But I'm like, do I do that? The big one is that instead of going to Disney for October that we've gone to for however many years, that we're going to go mid-November to see Disney at Christmas.
There you go.
So I think we might actually do Thanksgiving at Disney this year.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's awesome the number of conferences that are available.
Oh my God!
Pick and choose, and I think I really like. It's hard because you want to be well rounded and attend different shows, but you really like going to certain shows. So it's really hard.
Like,
so
I'm gonna miss DerbyCon this year.
Oh no!
Because they changed.
Because
they
changed the dates.
You're gonna miss DerbyCon forever.
I'm gonna miss DerbyCon forever because DerbyCon set dates. I had to make commitments to teach Sans courses.
And it just happened the way the cookie crumbles.
And then they changed the dates so that I am in the middle of teaching a Sans class during DerbyCon.
That stinks.
Yep.
So RSA, speaking of shows,
yes.
Arguably one of the largest, if not the, in attendance-wise across the board, likely the largest in the world, more than likely.
And arguably a different attendee base than some of these other shows.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. One of the things I heard is that many CISOs don't attend, CISOs of enterprise companies, right, or businesses, right, that need security services, right, don't attend RSA as much anymore because they're just bombarded.
Right.
And with some of the CISOs I spoke with, at the show or outside of the show that didn't attend were like, I send my next most senior or down from there, senior person who evaluates technology.
Right.
I send them to RSA to evaluate all the technology and then report back.
That makes total sense.
I agree. Yeah, I can see that.
Yep. Again, potentially a different market than some of these other, like DerbyCon.
More of a practitioner.
Maybe the practitioner as opposed to the manager. But then again, depending on the level of your organization, the manager practitioner is also one in the same.
Could be one in the same. Yeah. We saw a good AppSec presence at RSA, which was nice to see. And there's a lot more going on at RSA. It's hard to navigate, but there are pockets of practitioners taking training on how to from multiple different sub-organizations that RSA contracts with. AppSec people were there at a DevOps day. Alan Schimmel, John Willis and others were running the DevOps day, and that was very well attended, almost 1,000 people. So, I mean, my RSA experience was largely positive. I mean, anytime RSA happens, you always see people posting this, that, and the other thing. I thought it was well run in a good mix. Jeff, what was your experience?
Well, I was just going to pipe in and say, I've seen the whole gamut of, post RSA articles. I was reading one today, somebody was saying that, walking the expo floor gave them an existential crisis, which I can technically see, but I also think is a little bit over the top.
I agree. Over the top.
What I find is fascinating. Well, if you've never been there before, the Moscone Center was under construction the last couple of years, and it was reopened. And what used to be two big halls with a tunnel was now one big, huge hall. A lot of people I heard talking about just the difficulty of actually being able to hear anything, because there wasn't any little corner where you could get away from it. It was just one big, massive conglomeration of all these companies desperately trying to get your time.
So now effectively the Moscone Center that that hallway between the two sides of the street is also convention space?
It's all connected.
No, it's all connected. It was like one big show floor underground.
Oh, wow.
Right.
One big show floor, never ending. Yep. And so, and in that sense, because I talked to several people, and myself included, when you go into the expo floor, I tend to try to go to the edges, because that's where the newer, leaner, hungrier, different companies might be, the up and coming, rather than going down the middle where all the big established companies that we already know about are. So I tend to go to the fringes, but the fringes were also now, I think, down the middle as well, so that was difficult. But what I thought was fascinating, and I've experienced this for several years, is there's a probably one of the biggest or top 3 biggest B-sides happens in San Francisco immediately before the RSA conference, so B-side San Francisco.
Hence the shirt.
And hence the shirt. The last 2 years, it's been right there at Moscone. It's been at the IMAX Theater, the Metreon, that's right there. So it's all in the middle of things. What fascinates me, because I went to both, is how many people that go to B-side San Francisco will never set foot in RSA for various reasons. But conversely, how many people that go to the RSA conference, which is the big granddaddy, have no awareness or no concept that something like the B-sides community exists. And I don't know what to make of that. I just think it's fascinating that there's such a silo between those two communities.
Well, Jeff, I think that's a fantastic point. I'm glad you brought that up on the show, because I think it's a call to action for both, the really like 3 maybe areas, right? You've got the community side of in security, the security community. You've got the industry side, and you've got kind of the business and executive side that may, overlap with both areas, right? And those are 3 groups that I think need to do. Essentially, what we're calling for is more cross-pollination, right? If you've attended, let's say, RSA for the past 10 years, and maybe you've never gone to RSA, the conference, but you've gone to B-sides, now's your opportunity to maybe go to the main RSA conference in some capacity. There's lots of different events that happen there. And on the converse side, if you're in the industry or the business side, maybe you attend B-sides. I think that's a fantastic idea that I'm behind 100%. Now, I do want to address the show floor. I had no issues with the show floor. Now, I had some understanding going into having been to many different trade shows and tried to work the show floor. I've certainly learned my lesson. I think, Jeff, when you went last year, we also learned a lot of lessons from Jeff's experience on the show floor. And I think you have to look at the conference and say, okay, how many vendors are going to be there, right? For RSA, I think there's the most. Our next interview actually called out the number, and he had researched that Carson said there were 753 security vendors there. I'm not sure if that included the Innovation Sandbox, which was at the Marriott.
I think it must have, because I downloaded the list of exhibitors from the RSA website and just dumped them into a spreadsheet and counted, and I came up with about 740. So we're in the ballpark. 750-ish. That's a lot of companies.
It's a lot, though. So, but what I realized was that you have to plan ahead.
Absolutely.
Some shows you can go walk the show floor and hit all of them, right? RSA is not one of those conferences. No. Black Hat is not one of those conferences. You have to be strategic. I liked the fact that it was all, even though it was a gigantic space, most of it, aside from the Innovation Sandbox, was in one walkable floor. I didn't have to cross streets and go up and down stairs. I was basically like all on one level. I could walk the show floor. That was cool, and I had my list.
Because you went this year and not the last couple of years.
Right, exactly.
And now, it was under construction.
I have my list of people that I want to visit. That includes
now you had to do escalators and stuff to see some of the talks that were happening.
Absolutely, yes. To go when I go and presented my talk, I had to go up many different escalators to get to where I was going.
Or to go see Jay Beal and Adam Crumpin's talk at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right. So. So that I liked it being all on one floor. And again, I have my list of people that I wanted to visit. Now, inevitably, that doesn't mean because you made a list, right? So I had a list of our sponsors. I had a list of other companies that we wanted to visit for various reasons, right? And we did a lot of planning beforehand. That ends up being around 60 or so different vendors that we wanted to visit.
That's aggressive.
There was 2 of us, and there was multiple days, so it was totally doable. We built it into the schedule.
But that's still a lot.
It's still a lot, but also I got a chance to, in talking with my friends, visit other things that weren't on my list that my friends had seen. So John Strand, luckily, and I cheated, right? If you have and I don't know if it was my speaker badge or my press badge or the fact that I had both, right? Because I was a speaker and registered as press. I had the red thing at the bottom, and I was able to gain access to the vendor hall before it opened. And again, I don't know if that's because of speaker or press or both, whatever. But
probably press.
The guy was like, "You're cool." Press, probably, right? The guy's like, "You're cool. You can get in." I'm like, "Sweet." So I went to the Active Countermeasures booth where John Strand and Chris Breton and John was there. And now the show floor is largely empty. Like many of the vendors hadn't even gotten there yet. And John's like, "You got to come see this technology." Like walked me over to the Chronicle booth where they gave me a demo of Backstory. I was like, "That's awesome. Now I know why that's awesome," right? And John walked me over to like another booth. It was like a hardware packet capture thing. And I was like, "That's awesome." So even though I had a list, you talk to your friends and they're like, "Hey, I found this. It was really cool." So, I mean, for me, it was a positive experience. I went to TongaCon for the first time.
Nice.
Some cool parties that we went to and networked with folks.
Hey, did you make it to the blogger meetup?
I did, and
did anything happen at the blogger?
I accepted an award. That was one of the other highlights of the trip. Thank you to all of our listeners and everyone. All hosts, employees, sponsors. I thanked everyone, accepted the award. Thank you again, all of you.
That's awesome.
And so like, that's one of the first times you've accepted the award.
It is the first time I've accepted the award.
Well,
not an award. So best security podcast went to Risky Business.
Great.
Completely deserving. Love Patrick. Patrick's awesome. Yeah. I'm a listener of the show, his show as well. He does a great job, no question. And then a new category that we've won for the second year in a row is most educational security blog.
Which is weird because we only blog about our podcasts, right?
Yeah, and to get most it's an honor. I think that's fantastic, right?
I kind of like it. I was there last year accepting it for the first time. And, given that I do this primarily because to me, this is a vehicle where I can have an audience where I share my useless knowledge from 37 years in the business, but hopefully it rubs off and there's lessons to be learned. And it's all about education and sort of passing on the institutional knowledge to the next generation. I kind of think it's cool that we're winning for most education.
And the last year I was there at RSA and at the Social Security Awards and such, we didn't win anything.
Hey, happens sometimes.
And that was the year I believe Exotic Liability won Best Podcast.
No, I was there the year Exotic Liability
That's right. You
won.
were.
So the one year that I did manage to attend the blogger meetup, we didn't win it. Which whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
But
you know what? It just goes to show to the commitment that Paul that you've put in to keep the wheels on the ground for this. That people really like us, man.
Yeah, one of the things is. So we're learning in life in general is that having a regular time and being consistent with it is really important.
Oh, my word.
Right? And so that makes things, and then we like what we do. So if we've got a regular time and a regular every week, Thursday, right, for the past almost 14 years now, this is what we do. And I think that was certainly instrumental in just figuring out the structure and consistency.
Dream, vision.
Yep. Comes
determination,
courage. And I think our mission certainly is to educate the security community. So I think we should maybe stop talking about ourselves and
do some education. Do some education.
Education. Oh yeah, because this is stories, right?
Yeah. Which, if you haven't refreshed, I did add some stuff.
New why can't I say WordPress? I think I messed up WordPress in the introduction to the show. Something with that word today. I just can't say it.
Because it's WordPress.
Comments are evil in WordPress.
Oh my God.
I disabled them. I don't know if... No, ever since we've had WordPress, I've had comments disabled.
Yes.
It was when we were movable type. For a while, I had comments enabled.
But you had to moderate them.
So after you battle the spam of comments, right, and after you maybe overcome your concerns about can people put script tags or other evil bits in the comments, and then once you deal with the trolling that inevitably happens when you have comments enabled in blog posts, and then you go to moderation, and then you realize that someone posted a comment 6 months ago and you forgot to approve it for whatever reason. You come to the conclusion, I came to the conclusion, and many have, that comments in the blog just aren't worth it. Not at all. And I've had other systems in other different roles where we used Discuss, which was a pretty good plugin, which helped you overcome a lot of those issues. And then, like, no one really wanted to register. I think no one really wanted to take the time to register for an account, so no one comments. So it's like, well, like, why have it there? So I've had them disabled. Now it turns out if you did have them disabled or enabled rather in WordPress, WordPress doesn't use CSRF validation when you post a comment. Comments posted by an administrator account are not sanitized and can include arbitrary HTML tags, which if you CSRF attack and post as the administrator, you can post arbitrary XML tags, and the front end's not protected by X-frame options header, allowing attackers to open targeted WordPress site in a hidden iframe from an attacker-controlled website. So like the whole thing just snowballs into badness. There's a link in the show notes where you can get all the nitty-gritty. I think I linked, in the article that I linked to is the original research that you can read.
These are reasons why my personal stuff, which has not yet been moved, which is woefully out of date, whether it be movable type or WordPress, I'm moving to another platform, quote, hosted in the cloud where someone else is responsible for the platform.
That's what we moved to. WP Engine is the provider we chose for WordPress.
I'm going to GitHub.io.
There you go. Yeah,
like I can host a blog at GitHub. This is a no-brainer. The GitHub takes the fall for all of it because it does all the processing.
You do give up some control,
absolutely,
but you do, and you give that to the hosting provider. But
for what I need to do for a blog, keep it simple, stupid, and write your blog entries in Markdown and put them in a GitHub repository.
So, like, sometimes what I found, Larry, is you'll wish that you had access to the Apache and or Nginx config. And then there's other times where you're like, you know what, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that stuff.
But like,
and it's a decision you got to make.
My stuff, a blog to put some random shit that people can get on the internet.
Yeah, you're probably fine.
This is totally doable for me.
Yep. So let's see. I wanted to talk about, and this was an interesting article that I read that begged us some questions. Maybe our listeners can chime in. Intel Windows 10 graphics driver are riddled with flaws. Several flaws were fixed. The most serious was in insufficient input validation in the kernel mode driver with Intel graphics driver for Windows. Pretty common. The driver executes any instruction it needs on the CPU without waiting and can reference any memory address that's available because it's a graphics driver. It's kind of the DMA problem, right? Direct memory access.
Yeah.
So for performance, we're bypassing potentially some controls and letting the driver do whatever it wants. Now, my question was, could this also open up firmware attacks against the GPU hardware?
That could be really interesting.
If you're, in this case, a Windows driver, does that give you access to the hardware that just that driver is responsible for? Or if I'm inside of a driver like the graphics driver, does that mean I can access everything in the system, or are there protections? I'm like, how? Yeah, someone's got to know this. I haven't researched this problem.
And where does the graphic driver live? Does it live at ring 0? Or does it have interaction enough with ring 0 to potentially do other stuff?
All good questions. Many of our listeners know the answer to this question.
They're literally in their car screaming at us right now.
In my 60 seconds worth of research, I did find an article. So I would believe that any kernel driver could have access to any hardware directly. There are things in Windows that implement driver protection. I linked to an article from Microsoft. It does state in this article, for this particular driver protection, which may or may not solve the problem that we're talking about, but it does state that this particular protection is optional, which makes me think the level of protection you put in your driver, some of those decisions are left to the developer of said driver. Other protections in Windows may override that as well. I mean, there could be other Windows 10 level protections that do help you in this case. So I just thought it was interesting, as one of the briefings I did was with a company called Eclipsium, which provides detection and prevention for the firmware that sits on the hardware inside of your devices. So you've got a network card, you've got a graphics card, you've got a BIOS. All of those have firmware. Yep. That firmware is, you're able to read and write potentially to that firmware through the operating system. Because think about it. If I need to update the firmware, my BIOS, you go through the operating system. I mean, it used to be back in the day you had to boot on a floppy. Modern, BIOS systems or UEFI, you update through the operating system. So the operating system does have has control to do that, and you could exploit that as an attacker, or in the case of Eclipsium, be able to provide monitoring protection, which led to me begging the question about Windows drivers and their protection. And again, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm sure some of our listeners are absolutely...
Go back to our interview a bunch of episodes
with
ago
with
the UFEI.
It's Bob
folks.
Something, I think.
Yeah. Just search for it on the wiki.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Paul, the imaging thing I thought was pretty interesting about the GPU and all of that. And there was one that was illustrated to me today that I thought was amazing with some imaging stuff. And it was my story number 2, quote, getting random memory from malformed images from Facebook Messenger. And what this particular researcher did was created some malformed GIFs.
Is it GIFs or GIFs?
It's GIFs. It's GIFs.
GIFs.
GIFs, whatever.
It's
GIFs. It's GIFs. Created some malformed GIFs, sent them to himself via Facebook Messenger. But the malformed GIF didn't actually contain any data. So the preview he got back of his own GIF from Messenger had white and black stuff in it. So by taking that, right-clicking and saving it, he was able to do some analysis of it, and there was data there that he didn't provide. Like, he provided header. The image is this long, but the image was...
There was nothing after the header.
Right, there was nothing after the header. There was the header and the closer, but the closer basically said it's of this size.
Basic components of really most image files are a header, right? Metadata, perhaps.
Yep.
And then the actual, basically the bytes that comprise the image itself.
The image blob.
And you've done a lot of research into images.
And then a footer.
And then a footer.
So basically a header and a footer. Usually the header, the metadata is in the header.
In the header, okay.
So a header and a footer. Created a header, said, my image is so long, here's the footer.
And nothing, no data comprise the actual image.
But literally the image was header and footer together. It's this long.
But when he sent it through Messenger, he had data in that.
But sent it through Messenger. When Messenger rendered the image back, it was like, oh, okay, header, this much data, footer. And was retrieving random contents of memory from the Messenger server and populating that GIF.
That's super. That really is super interesting.
How could he tell it was random?
Well, so as part of that, he did multiple tests and analyzing the data. And one of the pieces of data that he retrieved was, in fact, an image that he had to manipulate, like instead of looking at video frames and swapping your height and your width, he swapped height and width, and sure enough, he was able to recover the data for an actual image there. Like
an image that wasn't his.
The image that wasn't his, that was retrieved from memory. And it wasn't a great quality image because he didn't
have all the data.
He didn't have all, he had portions of the data, like he was offset by, how many ever bytes or so much. But like, this is a really, take that aside from Facebook Messenger and start applying this to other types of services that do the similar type of thing. And his Python code is there for creating those images, and now start. Oh.
This is intriguing. I wonder if this is an issue of what we used to call in the old days remnants.
Yeah.
Where wherever the image was stored in memory or in temporary storage space, and there was nothing there, but there was something there previously, kind of like files are not really deleted, the file space is just opened up if whatever he was capturing was just whatever was there previously in that memory space or disk space. Interesting.
Yeah.
So did he disclose this to?
He did disclose it to Facebook. Facebook has allegedly fixed it. He had a brief 5-line disclosure timeline, and the meat of it was a video of what he was receiving and uploading and all this stuff, and talking about the code that the Python code that he used to create the images. Which
did he get a bounty for it?
I believe he got a $10,000 bounty.
Awesome.
Which is based on what my quick review of.
Yeah.
I was more interested in
the research stuff.
Yeah. So.
Any idea what the fix was?
I don't.
Yeah, sometimes you don't always get that.
It was. Yeah.
Speaking of Facebook, I thought this was really, and I have no evidence other than the fact that Facebook, Instagram.
Wait! I need to get my tinfoil hat on real quick.
Get your tinfoil hat on.
All the Facebook properties.
Well, no. So in addition to Facebook properties, in almost the same time window. Now I know this because, as I said, midnight Tuesday night, I was trying to update my slides, and I was having a bitch of a time with Google Drive, whereas I use Google Slides to produce my slide content, which is, it's not the greatest presentation software. However, it's cross-platform, and I can share it with anyone else who has a Google account, and I can export it in multiple formats, and I can embed it and post it on the web. So for those reasons, I fall on the sword and go, I know Keynote has way better features and functionality, but for me, it was just easier to, because in basically what drove this was, we do 20 webcasts a year, so my slides have to be shared and exported. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just, and as it turns out, you don't really need all that fancy functionality in presentation software. So in any case, I'm in Google Slides trying to do, and it's just timing out. My images aren't loading, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, what is going on? I just need to build. I couldn't build my slide deck. So I went to, I'm like, is it me? Because I put a new firewall in at home. I had swapped out some hardware and put a new firewall in. And I'm like, usually when something goes wrong, it's my fault.
Is it up for you type thing?
And yeah, it was, what was the website? I clicked on the wrong link. Hold on. They mentioned it in the article I linked to in the show notes. And I actually went to this website. Then I started referencing this article. And it was, of course, my scrolly wheel dies on me. What was it called? Down for just me. Down.
Oh yeah. Is it down for just me?
Is it down? It was a different one. Anyway, but there was a website that basically reported that yes, Google is down.
You know you're a manager when you don't know the name of the website that reports whether it's down for just you or
right.
Else.
Good Lord.
Is that Down Detector?
Down Detector. Thank you, Lee. Down Detector. But now Down Detector.
And here's a manager that still has his technical chops.
Oh,
ouch!
Beep beep beep. There was a beep sensor.
Yep. No, there wasn't.
Boy.
That's why our podcasts are on a 7-second delay.
Right. So Facebook was also reported on Down Detector, Larry,
and all the Facebook properties. You might add.
Right. And so, what did I say? I tracked the timeline. Gmail started its outage on Tuesday night. Facebook started its outage on Wednesday. My whole question was, what are the chances that both Facebook and Google had major outages in very near the same time frame, and there was no connection? So, I mean, you can let your imagination run wild.
Yeah. Was it
an attack by a malicious, evil, bad person? Was it a provider that somehow they had in common? It's unlikely that like their servers and hosting providers, do they share hosting? I don't know.
Some internet backbone issue?
Yeah, chances are there's some sort of interaction on the backplane somewhere.
Right. Yep. And
shared services, shared framework. And they had
but you have to think the redundancy that both Facebook and Google have to overcome that, so that both had the same kind of outage. My whole question is, what happened? I want to know what happened. I'm just genuinely curious what happened.
And that's a great question. I think, I don't know if Facebook and Google have either completed or released their analysis. I think Facebook will probably release what they had happened, and probably Google too. And I wonder,
could be. We'll see what happens.
Because based on previous experience, when outages like this have happened for both Google and Facebook, that they've released, here's what happened. Hey, we screwed up.
Right. Are they both using Amazon? That would be pretty funny. I mean, Google has its own cloud. I don't know what I don't pretend to know what Facebook is.
Facebook using Google's
Stay
cloud?
tuned to this channel.
So again, I mean, we could sit here and speculate all night long, which sounds like a lot of fun, I know, but we'll move on, and hopefully more information will arise on that situation, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I'm just saying it'll probably end up being something kind of silly and trivial.
Could be.
And not so nefarious as we're all making it out.
I know,
to be.
we're all hoping for something nefarious, though.
Yep. Speaking of nefarious, I like your story number 10, Paul, which is a little bit ridiculous, but still.
Oh, and so this is just like my the ridiculous story of the week.
Oh,
shit. And it's because we've been in this situation.
Yeah.
Where you're on one of these. It's happened to us more times than I think we really like to admit. So
I also think this speaks to the home/family monitoring of home internet and stuff.
Yeah.
And internet from your enterprise.
But also our experiences in posting audio and video. I mean, our podcast has been hosted in places where like we got to move it off those. Like when we first started. Yeah. Remember? I think it was Ocean.
It was Ocean
that provided us with space and bandwidth for the show,
and they were happy to do so.
But as we grew more commercial, and as we grew, we were like, I feel like
it's not appropriate.
Yeah, I felt like I was kind of taking advantage. I was like, thank you for helping us, get our start and all that stuff. And we moved to Libsyn, like a free thing, and then we moved into Libsyn's more kind of enterprise program, and another had to take place. And then we had Blip TV, and Blip TV went out of business. And then we've had YouTube and Facebook that have both removed our content in the past, and we've had to go through the official and unofficial channels to get that back. So like I get where this guy who drove 3,300 miles to talk to YouTube about a deleted video is coming from, right? Like I get the frustration. However, this person was very mentally unstable. Like I haven't gone through
Paul has limited his driving to 1,000 miles.
Yes. Yeah, I live in Rhode Island. Driving for more than 25 minutes, like it's a big deal.
That's an overnight trip.
So on Sunday, police in Mountain View, California, where Google is headquartered, arrested a man who drove more than 3,300 miles from Maine to discuss what he thought was the company's removal of his YouTube account and one video he'd posted, one about getting rich quick. It was not, the ironic thing was, it was not, in fact, deleted by YouTube. It turns out his wife deleted it, which she let her husband drive all the way across country.
Well, she probably didn't know.
Probably didn't know.
In the meantime, she was probably moving out.
She was concerned, and she was concerned about her husband's mental state, obviously. She told BuzzFeed News that he created, that the video created by 33-year-old Kyle Long was rambling and bizarre. So his unstable mental state led him to create this
video, which his
then
wife then
led
deleted.
him on this cross-country journey to go complain to YouTube.
Which his wife deleted, which he probably at 2 o'clock in the morning, unbeknownst to her, got in the car and started driving.
I mean, it doesn't say that anyone is hurt, and I do feel bad for Kyle as he's got some issues that need to be addressed. I feel bad for him.
Yeah,
it begs the question though: how many of our news segments late in the evening after we're all sauced have been deleted because of our rambling?
Right. True.
And arguably, how many more of these types of things are going to happen against these social media companies?
Yeah,
so a couple of weeks back, I saw this one about the Facebook content censors, in which like working in deplorable conditions and so forth and so on, and that people that have had their videos,
human beings working in the department for Facebook that are doing content,
a subcontractor that does the content, and there's big discussion about what these people actually see and deal with, and the type of working conditions, and they get paid minimum wage, and the type of content that they're viewing, and that they can't crack for seeing murders and all this type of stuff, and live stuff, and like people are showing up at their offices allegedly death threats, and waiting for the moderators to walk to their car, and are like holding them up at gunpoint.
So not only does it sound like a sweatshop, but they're being threatened.
Yes. Yes. And
I'm not sure that it's necessarily a sweatshop, but it's more the nature of the content of what they're required to look at.
The article very much indicates that it was a U.S. sweatshop.
Well, then I stand corrected.
But
I was exaggerating.
I've had conversations with people that are like, involved in law enforcement and going after like kitty porn. And I don't know if we've talked about it on the show or not, but just the stress levels of the stuff that they have to look at because they're looking for bad guys doing really, really horrendous things.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That was my week. That was my week this week, searching various underground areas. I hate to use the term the dark web for specific types of content that was not kitty porn,
right.
And the potential for engaging in that by doing those searches was terrifying.
Yeah, agreed.
And I had to have some automation.
Yeah,
so I built some automation, at least to verify what the hell I was, at least verifying whether the sites were up or down.
Yep.
So, but yeah.
Hence your furious Python coding this week.
Hence my furious Python coding this week, and my building my street cred at GitHub one commit at a time. So,
well, if Joff were here, he'd be asking, were you doing Python 2 or 3?
3.
This is true.
3. Yep. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, 3. Because by 2020, all Python 2 support will be dead, so you might as well start converting now. But yes, all of my coding was done in Python 3. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Lee, you have a story in there that cyber attacks will kill people soon. Should we be worried now?
I'm not dead yet.
Not quite.
You'll be dead by morning. Don't worry.
Well played, sir. Well played.
I feel happy.
Well, give me a couple bob and we'll take care of it. So what was going on is that this actually was a presentation at RSA that I didn't see, but I heard about, and they're speculating that with the work done in IoT compromise, where they're turning off the control system, the safety systems to allow invalid operations, that it's prepping to set it up so we could, blow things up and kill people. I'm a little skeptical, but the path is there. I mean, we've had several notable incidents that have in the past where they really have shown that they could wreak havoc with our critical systems and/or cause damage with them. So then they're extrapolating to the next move is to actually kill people with cyber attacks.
This is relevant to my interests.
I think we've talked about this in the light of that as we progress, and I've seen this progression that more and more protecting our cyber, air quotes, infrastructure is also protecting the public health, right, and safety, right? Public health and safety is how I would phrase that, Lee. So I think there's definitely a continuing trend that certainly Larry and I both have probably seen over the past 14 years. Like, yeah, it's really cool to mess with like Wi-Fi when it first came out, all the way to, well, wireless technology is how automated vehicles communicate, and now manipulating that technology is not just about sniffing someone's password back in the day because it was an open or web encrypted network, but now manipulating wireless could actually cause physical harm to people, and that's a trend that we've just been seeing more and more.
Welcome to SAN Security 617.
Right? When we first took that class in 2005...
It was Wi-Fi.
How much of it was really about public health and safety?
It was all Wi-Fi.
It was Wi-Fi. It was about communications and intercepting or taking out communications for Wi-Fi, which was largely just used to get internet. But now you look at healthcare, look at medical infrastructure, ICS.
And you look at the evolution of what 617 is, and then 617 today... Toot my own horn. We have 2 to 2.5 days of Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
The remainder is all of these other Wi-Fi. Wireless technologies that could potentially kill you.
I was describing a scenario to Larry earlier where the computer would talk to your phone. If the computer didn't have internet access to validate your authentication, it uses Bluetooth. Larry's like, that's probably low energy.
And with just works. And
yes, this was encrypted on top of the Bluetooth protocol because you can't trust the low energy protocol for anything. It's just a way to get
It's a transport method.
Yeah, a transport method.
An insecure
you have to
transport
encrypt
method.
on top of it.
Yep.
even with wired, though, I was reading a story the other day about, it was like somebody was checking the security at a hospital and they found a defibrillator on the hospital network. I'm thinking, and they were able to compromise. And I'm thinking, what happens if you mess with the defibrillator voltages while somebody's trying to be brought back to life? Holy crap.
Yeah, Lee, this is back to a conversation I had with someone that...
Yeah, you set all the voltages to 0. That could be a bad day for someone.
Or you set the voltages to 11.
Yeah, as high as they can go.
The knob goes to 10, but what if I set it to 11 or 12 or 13? Like, well, why would you do that? Because I can.
Yeah,
because you can.
Because the software didn't put any bounds to allow you not to.
Right, because I can. But why would you do that? Because I can. No, you're not getting this logic. Like, why would you do that? Because I want to kill someone. Oh.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's interesting because related to, and I don't think any of us have a story, but in the news this week have been the plane crash over the weekend in Ethiopia.
Yep.
And it's the second time this particular type of airplane has crashed in the last 6 months, which is, those of us that are, statistically minded, that's a significant event.
Yep.
And what I'm hearing, and I don't know if it proves to be true or not, but what I'm hearing some people reporting is that the problem is related to software.
Yes.
And the autopilot and the autopilot interpreting environmental circumstances,
AOA,
forces,
angle
would you
attack.
say?
Yep.
And misinterpreting and if I'm understanding correctly, the autopilot kicks in, so the computer takes over because they think something bad is happening and they're trying to correct it when really it's not happening, and the pilots have no ability to override it.
And in previous versions, all you had to do was push the stick and it would override autopilot. And in this particular case with the 737 MAX 8, pressing the stick would not disengage autopilot for these particular AOA type of conditions.
Yeah, so that just, I mean, talk about the whopper and all the this wasn't a trend or a theme at RSA, but it was just the perils of AI and continuing to automate.
And Jeff, even better, the continue to automate and the change was that the pilots are now saying that the documentation for these changes is criminal at best. But allegedly, many of the pilots have been educated on this, and the education standard varies worldwide. So I don't.
That was actually one of the early cards that Boeing played, is they believed the pilots hadn't been properly trained on the MAX 8.
Yep.
And a few years ago, there were a number of concerns where crashes were happening because the pilots weren't properly trained. I mean, it was a valid concern, but the one of the pilots in the crashes had just been really well trained on the new system.
But still, in a matter of crisis, in a manner of crisis, you forget. And to tie that back to IT security stuff, like in a time of crisis, like an incident, there are many things that you forget and you screw it up. So. Well, fortunately, in our industry, in many cases, it doesn't kill someone, much like some of these firmware-based attacks or some of these attacks against devices connected to a network.
Well, to me, and this might be a curmudgeonly viewpoint, and it may be dying out, and it may not hold water ultimately, but to me, it goes down to the fundamental, to tie it back into cybersecurity, and I think a lot of people, and we see it at RSA, the desire to automate security and trust automation, trust technology, where gosh darn it, at the end of the day, I want a human making a decision about what they're seeing and taking action against it. And is there, and it's sort of the whole argument against AI and machine learning is, in all sorts of different respects, is, do you trust the machines over you to trust the humans, even though statistically, the machines are going to make a much more, consistent decision based on all the information. But somehow, and maybe it's just me, I trust a person more than the machine.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think they had that initially. We've totally diverted from the original story, but I think with the 737 MAX 8, I think prior to that they had the pilots had the ability to make a decision, but that ability to make a decision and override that became taken away or more obtuse, in that they had to do something in time of crisis to avoid that type of thing.
Well, and that's the Whopper scenario.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. I mean, to tie it back to the original story, you know, there's all sorts of bad things that could be done with the technology that's out there, and to me, it's like, well, why aren't more people doing it? Is it because they haven't figured it out yet? It's not easy. Maybe they're not as inherently evil as the FUD makes everybody out to be. Yep. But it certainly could happen. Talk about a risk-based decision. Do you let it out there because it saves lives, or what actions do you take that are going to slow the doctor down? Slow whatever down. Based on. Oh, but you have to secure it. You have to do this and that.
I will say.
Have we talked about the 3-letter acronym that starts with P and ends with I yet? No,
we have.
All right. So my story number 4. DM Sniff point of sale malware has flown under the radar for at least 4 years.
What?
Now, one of the unique characteristics, according to Flashpoint researchers, on this malware is that it had a domain name generation algorithm, which they claim is not all that common in point-of-sale malware.
Huh.
So the callback servers...
Not uncommon, right?
Right.
Okay.
No.
It is very common, or
it's not common in point-of-sale malware, which surprised me as well.
Okay. As opposed to some botnet stuff that does have that.
Other types of malware...
It doesn't surprise me, but go ahead.
So they did say... my question was, how did it evade detection? Domain name algorithm generation is one thing that it could evade the callback detection, but how did it not get picked up in the first place on the system? From the analysis, the little analysis that I read on it, there wasn't much detail. It didn't seem all that sophisticated other than the domain name generation algorithm. But the article went on to say DM Sniff is another name in a growing list of evolving threats. During their research, they found this malware was primarily utilized to target small to medium-sized businesses, such as restaurants and theaters.
Huh.
Now, my first thought was, well, if it wasn't that advanced, it was evading detection based on the targets, banking on the fact that restaurants and maybe theaters don't have the advanced detection capabilities. Mm-hmm. Unless it's a large chain restaurant, perhaps, right? But as an attacker...
Don't make that assumption.
Okay, so Jeff's more of the expert in that area than I am. But if I'm an attacker now, put my evil hat on, if I want to use somewhat unsophisticated malware, I don't want to go off and pay a lot of money for something that's very sophisticated. Maybe I don't have the skill set to develop something that's greatly sophisticated. The way I evade detection is I target small businesses that have point-of-sale systems that don't have really great advanced security programs or technology. And then I can evade detection. That seems to me, again, speculation, but that seems to me what happened here.
I would agree. Yeah.
So I just thought that was an interesting thing that I don't know we've ever theorized on that. I mean, we probably have, but this is a clear example of that now that you could speculate is happening today.
Yep. So
do you want Mike?
Yes, Jeff. I definitely want your take on this. Yes.
So, that 3-letter thing that
PCI.
Damn it! Now we have to drink.
It's a shame. It's good scotch. I don't mind drinking.
It is good scotch.
Want to take a shot? We said PCI.
I mean,
because we've got this other stuff that you didn't try over here.
Oh boy, now things are going to get interesting.
I mean, point-of-sale malware has been a thing for probably 5 years now. I mean, the Target Home Depot breaches were point-of-sale malware. None of it was ever sophisticated.
Yeah,
and that's for several reasons. And not to fault, I wouldn't fault PCI specifically in terms of the data security standard, because if you look at the standard, I'm not sure what would technically catch point-of-sale malware. But hold that thought. I think the more significant issue is the paradigm shift that PCI, the data security standard, was written under the presumption that an attacker, a bad guy, is going to break into a large organization that has a large repository or database of tens of millions of credit cards, get in, steal it, and get out. It was not perceived to be, from a risk perspective, as big a deal to go after the quote unquote little guys that only have a few hundred or a few thousand cards, because the risk of the attacker, of the bad guy, is why would I risk being caught, being detected, being apprehended to go after a few hundred or a few thousand versus the whale the whale hunt of going after the tens of millions.
If there are similar systems deployed across thousands of SMBs, your take could be equal to that of catching a whale.
With the article, it reminds me, just to set the stage, and then I want to hear your comments, but the article did say that it was persistent in that it was continually collecting credit cards. It wasn't going for that like one big store of credit cards. It was collecting them as they went.
Well, and that's the point I'm trying to make. The sort of the attack methodology of let's harvest a few hundred or 1,000 over multiple point of sale systems in smaller retail locations, whether they're restaurants, gas stations, whatever. Emphasis on small. The payoff is, you can do it undetected for, weeks, months, years, and the end result is as devastating as, breaking into a large department store. So, and this is an issue I have with PCI, at least in terms of its implementation, is historically the focus has always been on the big players with very little emphasis on the small players. Now, technically, they're all, if you take one credit card or 100 million credit cards, in theory, you're supposed to follow PCI DSS. The problem comes in the enforcement. The problem comes in the scalability of, what's that restaurant right behind the studio, the Treehouse, whatever it's called.
Treehouse Tavern.
What's their liability and what's their impetus to go and do the whole full-blown PCI data security standard? What's most likely happening is they've got some sort of payment gateway that came in and said, hey, for 5 cents on the dollar, we'll give you the point of sale systems, however many you need, 6 in the restaurant, and we'll do everything for you. We've got you covered. And that's how most of PCI works for the millions of smaller businesses. So the attackers are smart. They're like, okay, all these smaller companies are neglected, nobody's monitoring, nobody's watching. We can do this undetected for months and months.
Now, Jeff, I have a question for you on this, and somewhat of a technical in the sense of it gets in the nitty gritty of PCI and very specific question. So many moons ago, I was on a penetration test. I was using Core Impact, right, and it deployed the agent deployed. New agent deployed, right? It was and it happened to go on a point of sale system. And so me trying to underscore the impact, I was like, well, let me just take screenshots, right? Because that's pretty benign. I'm not, probably not going to crash anything in my experience of testing the Core Impact agent. So I was just like pushing the screenshot button. Now, as credit cards were being scanned in through this point of sale system, and I don't even know what type of point of sale system I wouldn't even release that public, even though it was years ago, and I want to say where I was.
Let's put it this way. I think I know where it was and which point of sale systems it was.
You probably do. But the credit card number was clearly displayed on the screen, so merely just taking, randomly timed screenshots, I was collecting other people's credit card information. Does PCI dictate whether or not the credit card number can be displayed in full on the screen? Is that something in PCI, or there's some other language that basically points to that as being like not acceptable to the PCI standard?
Yes, it does address that. There are specific requirements that address what can be displayed on a screen or printed out on a receipt. I mean, in the early days, your credit card number was printed completely on the receipt.
Right.
And then PCI came out, which said you have to, and it gets a little bit, particular on the language, but there's one requirement that says if you're displaying the credit card, you can only display the first 6 or the last 4 digits.
Right.
That you have to mask or obfuscate the middle digits. Now, that has been translated into most receipts these days. You only get the last 4 digits, if any. There was a time, and I'm not going to say which vendor it was, but I've been traveling for years, and one set of hotels I'd go to would print the last 4, and the rental car company would print the first 6.
Yeah,
or even between the two,
right?
You could get the whole credit card number if you just stole enough of my receipts.
And even if you were missing 4 digits, you could probably brute force that potentially.
And then it becomes the CVV or the CVC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what's often misunderstood, though, is there's a separate requirement for if you're going to store the credit card, you need to store it encrypted. And a lot of people are like, well, let's just store the first 6, last 4. And so they sort of confuse the two requirements, which at some point, if they do it right, is okay. I mean, it's always a good rule. If you don't need the credit card, don't store it, which is what more and more companies are going to these days. And it's been painful. And because, in the early days, I had customers that, if they were in the accounting department, they were doing disputes or fraud investigations, they would do the database lookup based on the credit card number. That was their search criteria. And to convince people, no, you don't really need the credit card number. The last 4 digits and the time of sale and the amount of purchase
and the type of credit card.
You've got other indicators that are going to be a pretty good indicator that you're looking at the right transaction. So one of the side benefits of some of the games of PCI over the year, which companies have engaged in to try to either reduce the footprint, what's called the card data environment, and the idea of segmentation, and sort of limiting. I see it as we only want to do security on these small systems and not do it anywhere else. So let's segment only the fewest number of systems that are involved in credit card processing. That and just identifying where the credit card flows are, where credit cards are being stored. How many people in the marketing department are downloading copies of the transaction database for some sort of promotional program, and they're copying over the tens of thousands, millions of cards.
The responsibility question also, I think, needs to be brought up in this context. In that, going back to my example, is the manufacturer or reseller of the point of sale hardware and software responsible if they are displaying the credit card number? Are they in violation of PCI? Is the merchant in violation of PCI? And is that dependent on, if I'm the software and hardware provider, if Larry's the merchant, and I give Larry the option, like a checkbox, display credit card on screen or not, does that put the responsibility on Larry? And then if I don't have that checkbox and I'm displaying the credit card number, does that come on me? I mean, do we get into those discussions with PCI, Jeff?
Yeah, you do, and you're sort of tripping on what's a little bit of a can of worms. So first, to clarify, when we say point of sale system, the best way to, for anybody to envision this is going to a department store, a Target or a grocery store. You're at the checkout stand, and the cashier is standing at what used to be a cash register, but now is a computer.
Sure.
That is the point of sale.
Yep. Okay.
The device where you're dipping or swiping your credit card and typing in your debit PIN, if that's the case, or your loyalty number, phone number, or whatever, that is not the point of sale. But a lot of people think that is the point of sale. That is technically called. It's got several names, but it's generically called the point of introduction. It's the place where the credit card sort of enters into the whole system. But a very common misunderstanding is a lot of people think of that card reader keypad device that the customer, the consumer interfaces with as the point of sale. It's not the point of sale. The point of sale is what it's plugged into. And very often that device is plugged into over a serial port or a USB connection. It's an ancillary device to what's essentially a computer.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I bring that up because there's a lot of misunderstanding in that area. Those devices, those point of introduction devices, go through a separate PCI certification program that puts it through, security checks as a device.
It has to be tamper-proof to a certain standard, I would imagine, right?
Well, just depending on what it's doing, whether there's encryption there or not, and we, like I said, we should have a whole segment on PCI sometime.
No, I agree.
But technically, it's an ancillary device to a computer. There is no strict requirement that any data coming off of that device going over a serial connection or a USB connection into the point of sale be encrypted, because the presumption is it's a closed network. And this is sort of one of the ironies of PCI, and this is something I struggled when I was at Tenable, trying to get Tenable to understand, was when we think of endpoints in enterprise terms, we're thinking of desktops that are in offices, that are in generally physically security protected spaces. But in a retail sense, in a PCI sense, the endpoint is the point of sale, which is publicly facing 10,000 times all over the country. It's a whole different scenario, but it's still sort of collectively called an endpoint.
So does the computer or hardware and software at the point of sale, where does the responsibility fall? Does it fall on the merchant that is able to configure that, or does it fall on the provider of said software and hardware at the point of sale?
And the short answer is yes. I mean, technically it falls on the merchant because it's their system if they own it.
Gotcha.
They typically own it. But more and more, especially if you think smaller merchants or the rest, the Treehouse Tavern behind you, that system is being provided to them by a middleman,
a reseller that would manage the device, right? So now you've got you're introducing a third party, right? There's the merchant, there's the reseller / consultant or managed services provider, right? And then there's the manufacturer or creator of said software and hardware.
Well, and it's not a managed service provider in the sense of we generally think of it. They're generally called payment gateways or payment processors. In some cases, they're assuming the liability, and they're just we'll deal with these 1,000 little restaurants that are on the corner, and we've got you covered. We'll take the responsibility.
Like a Stripe or a Square.
Square is the classic example. Square very explicitly says, use our device, use our software application. You have no liability. We assume all the liability.
I got you. Right. So if Square's displaying that credit card number in violation of PCI, they would be liable. Yeah.
Well, it's not technically a violation. It's discouraged, but the way the requirement reads is don't display it unless you have to.
Unless you have to, yeah.
And if you have to, there needs to be a legitimate business reason, which is very subjective. But most devices, most point of sale software, the display that the cashier is seeing on the actual computer screen, most of the devices, if they've been updated relatively recently, they're not showing them anymore.
Yeah,
where the credit card usually comes into play, seeing the full card is people on the back end. They're doing
a fraud investigation,
or a customer said I didn't make that purchase, so that it's what's called disputes. So any of that sort of what they call post authorization processing, that's where the credit card usually shows up in its entirety. But again, less and less, because more and more people are figuring out, I really don't need that to see the full card. And if you don't need it, don't store it.
Right.
I mean, quick aside, I had a customer several years ago that spent well into the six figures implementing a tokenization solution, which means replacing the credit card with some sort of value, a token that represents the credit card. And they did all this under the pretext of we can take so much of our systems out of scope and not have to do security because there's not a credit card there. It's only a token. And at the end of the day, to make a long story short, after they spent all this money, they'd implemented everything. I simply asked the question, well, who within your organization needs to see the full card? Who needs to take the token and revert it back to the credit card so they can do their job? And the answer was nobody. So the implication is, why did you go through the tokenization? You just didn't need to store it in the first place because nobody's using it. So they spent a lot of money for no good reason.
Thank you, Jeff. Two quick stories before we round it out, unless anyone has.
I have one that I'd love to talk about real quick.
So I'll do these two shouldn't take long, and then we'll do Larry's. Hackin' OS. I did not validate anything about this project. However, Hackin' OS is a beginner-level CTF-style vulnerable machine. The author says they created this VM for their university cybersecurity community and all cybersecurity enthusiasts. Again, I didn't validate it, so download and use at your own risk. And I'm saying that it could be malicious when in all likelihood it's not if it is someone's university project, but I did not validate it. I just thought it was cool to highlight those things as those trying to learn security and get into the field love that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And what do sexy selfies, search warrants, and tax files have in common?
This one.
They've all been found on resold USB images. Now, this is entertaining, and they say this material was recovered from these devices. There were nude images of a middle-aged man, along with contact details, legal documents, such as a search warrant and risk assessments, financial papers dating back years, along with personal data, tax forms, wage slips, based on 200 devices they bought off of eBay and maybe other secondhand stores where you can get that kind of, or online sites you can get that kind of stuff. It's not really news. We covered this with SIM card attacks. Larry did a whole segment on it.
And the sad part is, I still have those SIM cards.
And we covered it, I think, with hard drives and other things back in the day. It seems that even still today, more things are stored on electronics, and people are looking to resell their electronics without going through the proper formatting and wiping methods that would remove your data from them.
And so to that real quick, unrelated story I want to discuss. There's a story in the show notes about recovering TPM keys by sniffing the bus. So if you were to purchase a laptop that was encrypted using the TPM module, there is a possibility that you could recover the TPM keys used to encrypt that laptop by sniffing the bus fairly easily and inexpensively, to then take those keys to decrypt the hard drive. Decrypt the hard drive.
The one hard drive of the one laptop you got.
Yes.
Given that it's likely different. It's in TPM is different keys that it obviously encrypted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. But so that's an aside. The one that I wanted to discuss was my story number one, TapLock, quote, the unbreakable padlock.
We've covered this before.
No, this is
this the second or third time?
This might be the third time.
TapLock. Oh, it says, okay, hold on. This is also from the Register, which is where my story came from, about the USB drives. TapLock once, twice, three times a screw up.
So the first...
Okay, so confirms that this we've talked about this before. But yet this is a new thing. A third time TapLock is screwed up.
So, in the case, the first two were technical. Like BLE, they fucked up. The API, they fucked up.
This is the Bluetooth lock. You put your phone
the Bluetooth lock that you can use biometrics and
there was multiple ways to unlock it.
And you could like find out where the locks were with the API. So
yes,
you could
I remember.
And then you could go unlock everybody's locks. The final one was a physical. In that if you had a screwdriver, you could effectively...
lots of supplements for a screwdriver. Anything that'll be,
like
a sharp, pointy instrument of some kind.
You could physically spin the back of the casing of the lock off, open the lock, and then with the screwdriver you could...
Short two pins?
No. You could trigger the hasp.
Oh, like a physical, like really physical, like
the back is off.
Like a handcuff pick.
Like the back is off. I have access to where the hasp blocks, and I can take the screwdriver and go, boink.
So so pretty similar to how you unlock handcuffs, right?
No, non-double locked handcuffs.
Yep,
exactly.
I was saying that was a lot like how you unlock those master lock, the combo ones, the gold ones, where you could try and do the combo, but if you slid a shim in the side, you could release the hasp just by manipulating the mechanism.
Is that the master locks that have the it's a circle on the front and you move it in different directions, up, down, left, right? Is that one?
That wasn't the one, but there are some similar types of attacks for those.
For that one, okay.
One, they can typically be shimmed with two shims because of the double wall. And that one, it's interesting.
The ones with the I don't know what to call it, but it's the metal
the keypad.
circle. No, it's a metal.
But it's fun watching you try to describe it.
I know the one.
It is. It's a metal circle on top of the lock that you can move up, down, or left, right in a combination or series of up, down, left, or right.
So I have
unlock
you have
it.
to slide the tiles to make a picture.
No, it's a joystick that goes up, down, left, or right.
Yeah.
And I have a lock.
I have a couple of those
that
too.
I thought I programmed to be up, down, left, right, left, right,
A, B, start.
BA, or BA.
You don't have A, B, BA start.
But so no BA, but up, down, left, right, and it doesn't open.
Yeah, I had bad luck with those too. But I thought, so my point was on those, they had something around the lock one, which you call the loop.
The hasp.
The hasp, that would prevent shimming.
They may have.
Yeah.
But.
Right.
I don't know if there's ways around that shim anyway.
We have Deviant back.
Yeah, it's Deviant's the expert, the folks at Tool.
The master lock is from the bottom, so you just split it up the side.
Yep.
I got you.
Yeah, that was also one of the ones with this particular lock, physical. You could basically take like a loading tool, like I took with a tool with a hook on it, stick it up and go boink, and the keyway was not preventing any attacks.
Interesting. Also, the lockers in like high school, you could turn the lock and kind of feel, just by feel, to see where the combination led to.
Yep.
Is that a thing? Is that how they did that in the high school lockers?
Yeah. Or if you knew someone that had access to a master key, you could take an impression, they could file your own lock, and then you could get a key, and then you could break it off, and the girl that you were, quote, infatuated
what bugs me?
I mean, I wouldn't be speaking of this like.
Wait, why would you break the key off in her?
It was an accident.
I mean,
but that's what I heard.
Oh, you were trying to leave her a love note inside of her locker, and then you broke the key off by accident.
Right. I mean,
your friend did.
That's what I read on the
internet.
internet.
That's what your friend did, yeah.
I mean,
I've got this conundrum about high school locks that has been bugging me since high school. That
was a long time ago, Jeff.
It was a long time ago, and when you went on Christmas vacation or Easter break, you're off for a week. I came back, I could never remember the combination of my locker, and yet 40 years later, I remember I remember the combination of my lock. I can remember it now. I couldn't remember it then.
You know marijuana affects your short-term memory, Jeff. I don't know if that was it. The 60s when you were in. No,
it was the 70s.
Yeah. Well, I rest my case.
I rest Paul's case. We moved on to cocaine by then.
Yeah, it had moved on, right? The trend had shifted.
Anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
I had a quick story just to share, and we don't have to talk about it, but I just think it's kind of cool because I'm into geeky stuff like quantum computing.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff, this
this is a cool article that physicists have on a quantum computer. They were successfully able to reverse time. Mind blown.
Jeff, it's interesting. The professor here is actually listed as Dr. Strange. I think that's kind of weird.
This is relevant to my interest. Stay tuned. No, seriously, stay tuned.
Okay.
When is the Doctor Strange sequel? Doctor Strange is one of my favorite Marvel movies.
I have a technical talk in the works.
Nice.
That is some time away, entitled "How I Became a Time Lord."
But imagine
time is irrelevant.
If you can reverse time with a quantum computer, you could break in and then reverse time and make it like it never happened.
I mean, they watched Doctor Strange. That's exactly what he can do is reverse.
I went the Doctor Who route.
Yeah, Doctor Who, sure.
How I became a Time Lord.
Yeah.
And it's a ways out yet.
Other favorite Marvel movie? Yeah. I like the ones that are kind of like on the I like Venom. Venom was awesome. Doctor Strange and Venom are two. My kids are really into it, so we're watching all of them. And I have to say, other than the really popular ones, the Iron Mans and the Spider-Mans.
Daredevil?
But Daredevil was okay.
It was interesting, yeah. For an older one.
I've watched because my kids are watching, so I'm watching them all for the second time. And some of the other ones like Venom, I cannot let my kids watch because they'll have nightmares forever.
Yep.
I really like that one, and Doctor Strange, which is another one that I don't know that I'd let my kid. They might get freaked out with the doctor. It's a really bizarre, and kind of dark. So those are my two favorites. So before we close out, favorite Marvel movies, anyone?
So I haven't seen, just because of availability, content, busyness, I haven't seen some of the newer ones. But Any of the X-Men stuff, I really
The
enjoyed.
X-Men were good, yeah.
Any
The
of
early ones were better, yeah.
Of all the X-Men movies I've seen, I've thoroughly enjoyed them, and I'm very much a Marvel over DC guy. Considering Wolverine's been my favorite for years.
I don't necessarily have a favorite Marvel comic, but just as a shameless plug, I give a talk that talks about my NSA days as a cryptographer, and it's called Tales from the Crypt ... Analyst. And a few years back, I had the marketing department at Tenable make a graphic that was the old comic book from Tales of the Crypt, which I think is a DC comic.
Oh, yeah, that's correctly. A good question, Jeff.
I think
I want to say it's a DC
judgment.
comic.
Yeah.
But, I got a friend of ours, One Dark One, to make up stickers because for some reason she said, you should have your own stickers. So I'm going to be, as I'm giving my talk, which this year is more Tales from the Crypt, which is the story of the beginnings of penetration testing at NSA. I will have stickers available if anybody's interested.
Now, Lee, favorite Marvel comic books, movies, characters?
DC or otherwise.
Yeah. So lately, just saw the Captain Marvel movie. Loved the hell of it. It's a great origin movie. Yeah. But still, my guilty pleasure for fun is got to be Deadpool.
Yeah.
I mean, that is so not DC.
Yeah. Deadpool 2 was not as good, but I do enjoy the Deadpool. Again, two movies that I can't let my kids watch.
I have not seen Deadpool 2, and
you should
spoiler alert.
I feel like the first
no spoiler alerts, but literally just based on time and what other content that we consume. That
right.
I have so much content that I have yet to consume.
I hear it. This weekend, I will take my kids, hopefully, to Captain Marvel because they're bugging me to go see it. And we were away when it came out. So
aside, that's a great question. How do you deal with some of the younger ones at the movies?
It's difficult. Okay. And my youngest one would be very, very upset if I did not take him. So whatever that brings, we will deal with it because if we're going to a Marvel movie, my youngest is going, man, because he is a huge Marvel fan. Yep. Huge. And it's from watching, actually, YouTube videos.
Right.
Then I was playing with him one day, and I put the Spider-Man in front. He's like, that's Spider-Man. I put Captain America in front. He's like, that's Captain America. And you put Hulk. It's like, and he was naming all. I'm like, where did you learn this? This is awesome. And then he's like, can we watch the movie? I'm like, yeah. So we're watching the entire archive of Marvel movies over and over again.
Same thing. Star Wars for us in that Orion, the youngest, at not quite 6, doesn't quite have the motivation to sit down for more than an hour for a movie.
Yes.
To a movie theater, and she's just about. Like, we have not seen Solo because various conditions.
I won't say that. Now, my youngest son is named Luke, and I did. He said he wanted to watch Star Wars the other day, and after I jumped up and down for joy for a little while, I did put on Empire Strikes Back, and then I was explaining it to him, and he was understanding it, and to the point where he told me, he's like, "Daddy, Darth Vader is my father."
And you're like,
you're getting it, dude. You're getting it. Yes. This is the whole thing. So it's
which reminds me.
Now, did you introduce him to a girlfriend? His girlfriend,
which is also his sister.
That he cut off and fell down the. Wait. No.
Yeah.
So one last story, and nobody's going to appreciate it because they're not that old. But back when I was in high school and college, movie theaters had one screen. And they would show one movie. So if you wanted to see the latest movie coming out, say, I don't know, Empire Strikes Back,
right?
You had to stand in line for hours and hope to get into the next showing.
Oh, I think you told me this story, Jeff.
I might have told you this off the air, but I was standing in line for 2-3 hours waiting to go see Empire Strikes Back with a bunch of friends, and finally the previous showing let out, and just as we're getting ready to go in, somebody walks past us and says, "I can't believe Darth Vader's his father." Ultimate spoiler.
Ruined.
Ultimate spoiler. Ruined.
What, in my opinion, is my most favorite and greatest science fiction movie of all time.
Yep.
But
so I still twitch about it.
I got to tell you, I think I might be more committed than you are.
You are, yes. Yes.
Considering I have Star Wars tattoo sleeves.
Right.
My favorite comic book was not Marvel. It was DC Comics. It was called Weird Mystery Tales.
There is another segment after this, so I can't.
Yeah, let's move on.
Take us out. But with that, we're going to take a short break and air our interview.
Over and temporarily out.
Temporarily out. Carson Willem from VM Ray. Talk about sandboxing and malware sandboxing. Stay tuned.